Number 1. When I was a teenager, I was mostly quiet, shy, and had minimal confidence, and also I have never had a lot of friends. I spent most of my time reading in my bedroom, away from the daily chaotic noise and drama of a large family. When I was 16, my mother talked me into joining the local gym with her. She was already a member, and I eventually agreed. We went to the gym once a week, and for the first few times we went into the gym and worked out on the equipment. However, the next time we decided to visit, I asked if we could go swimming instead, as I have never been a great swimmer and would like to improve my swimming skills. Now, I'll let you know at this point that the swimming pools we would be using, I also used during primary school for standard swimming lessons that the school provided, so I had a good knowledge of the changing rooms, etc. Some of the individual changing cubicles have holes in them, and whenever I have used one of these cubicles, I had always made sure I covered up any holes. Anyway, we headed into the changing rooms on this particular day and found a double changing room cubicle unoccupied, and we decided to use it together. I checked all the walls for any holes, I found 2, and I plugged them up with tissue. We are both changed and are heading towards the exit of the changing rooms to get to the pool, and we are both walking slowly as the floor was quite wet and we didn't want to risk having any unnecessary accidents. Then I spotted him. I noticed a middle-aged guy with dark-colored hair and a pot belly. He was holding a camcorder. I alerted my mother, and she was in a state of confusion as to what she was actually seeing. He was walking around the changing rooms using his camcorder to obviously record people, as he had his eye to the viewfinder and he was unchallenged by anybody. My mother quickly hurried me along, and we made it to the pool. I asked my mother if we should alert the lifeguards about the guy, but she had come to the conclusion that he was making a documentary. She thought this because the leisure center did also have security guards, and they would never allow such a thing to happen. Shaking my head. Anywho, fast forward 3 weeks or so, and I was reading the newspaper. One article caught my eye. It was about a pervert who had been caught recording people in the changing rooms with a camcorder and putting his camcorder up to the aforementioned cubicle changing room holes. That's not all. The police had found hundreds of hours of recordings from the changing rooms, including videos of children in various states of undress too. Absolutely sickening. I showed my mother the article, and also we watched the story being told on the evening news too. My mother was in shock, dumbfounded, but at least this pervert was caught and stopped once and for all. What really bugs me, though, is the fact that at 9 years old, I was aware of these holes in the cubicle walls, and yet 7 years later, they were still there, including more. Just how long had this pervert really been operating? Number 2. This all happened when I was in high school in the late 1990s. I grew up in a rural western town. That meant not much to do in town, but lots of places out in the heavily wooded canyons and hills right outside of town. One particularly popular spot for hanging out, hiking, rock climbing, and doing various other things is called Falling Rock. It's right along the rim of Dark Canyon, already spooky sounding enough, and features pine woods going from a highway straight out to a sharp, abrupt drop-off down a sandstone-limestone cliff. It's several hundred feet down to the creek at the bottom, and there are various hiking trails and ways to get around the cliffs and down to the creek. I went there frequently with friends in high school, not to smoke weed or drink or whatever, but because the place was also held as sacred by the Lakota, and by proxy, by teenaged wannabe Wiccans like me, we'd see their red prayer bundles up in the cedars all along the cliffs, and to me and my coven of fellow dumbasses, that made this an obvious place to visit and try to contact spirits and whatnot. I hiked it enough to become very familiar with the area, especially with a deep overhang that was almost like a shallow cave. It wasn't visible from the top of the cliff or from the main hiking trails. I only learned about it after someone else showed me how to get to it by scooting down a steep incline between two particular pine trees on my butt. Also, during this very confused time of my life, I had a best friend who was an extremely bad influence and who kept getting me involved with older guys. She started seeing a guy in his early 20s, she was 18, and more or less told his 40-something uncle that I was all his if he wanted me. I was a 16-year-old dumbass, didn't know about this scheme, just knew my best friend had just invited me up to Falling Rock to hang out with her and her boyfriend. I was less happy when I showed up and found the uncle there. I'd met him before. He wasn't unattractive or even especially creepy. Actually, he was quite attractive. It was just knowing that he was more than twice my age and very clearly wanted much more. He didn't want just sex. He was in love with me and wanted me to love him too. I knew it. I just didn't know what to do about it. I did tell my friend I didn't want to see him around when she and I got together. She apparently ignored that bit of what I said. He and my best friend's boyfriend were both cowboys, following the rodeo circuit. As such, they showed up at Falling Rock in their boots and hats and all that, and it made them slow. My friend was morbidly obese, and none of them knew anything about Falling Rock, whereas I knew the whole area very well. I had driven my own vehicle there, but had parked in the lower lot about a quarter-mile closer to the highway than the place where they'd parked theirs. When I saw that the uncle was there, and he started getting overly friendly right away, I planned to get away as soon as possible. We started walking, and it wasn't long before I got way out ahead of them, ignored their calls to come back, and vanished into the woods down one of the less used hiking paths. This was broad daylight, and I had a plan. I was going to just loop around to the northwest through the thick woods and come back up to the lower parking lot, get in my car and drive away, and let my friend explain why she brought the uncle later. I made good time and got back up towards the road to the main parking area where my friend and the uncle had parked. I was almost there when I saw another guy, close to the uncle in age, but slimmer, blond, with a beard, come up the trail from the parking area. We were a few hundred yards from each other, but he stopped, clearly seeing me. I don't know what it was, but I didn't like something about his stance, his expression. I don't know what. I started to slink back down the draw I had come up, and he started to follow me. No mistake about it. He turned off a well-worn, obvious path to the Falling Rock cliff face to follow me, little teenage girl, down into the nothing but deer trails and scrub and cacti. He didn't say anything all the while. It seemed like he was trying to be as quiet as possible. I knew the area better than he did, though, and was a lot less cautious about my footing. I got back to the top of the cliffs as quick as I could and popped up just ahead of where the uncle was sauntering along the edge, right next to where the big overhang would be. The uncle and I saw each other. I pointed back down the trail where the strange guy with the beard could clearly be heard stomping up behind me. And then I dropped down on my ass and boot-scooted right out of sight. I got into the overhang and heard over my head this exchange between the uncle and the bearded guy.
"Hey, the hell you think you're doing?"
asked the uncle, sounding absolutely pissed.
"I'm looking for my girlfriend. She just came up here. Dark hair,"
says the other guy.
"Oh yeah? What color shirt you wearing?"
I was wearing a gray hoodie with my dad's college's logo on it.
"Gray says U State,"
called the bearded guy. The uncle proceeded to go absolutely crazy, yelling and cursing, and based on the noise, throwing fallen tree limbs at the other guy. The other guy just ran. I could hear him thumping and crashing down the steep hillside not far from me. My friend's boyfriend came running when he heard all the noise, and I could hear him yelling at the guy too. All kinds of vile things you wouldn't think a good Christian boy would say. The uncle called my name for a bit before I finally came out of the cave, and then my fat friend finally joined us too. It was a weird day to have your sort of stalker save you from someone who seemed to really have it out for you, but I'm pretty sure that's just what he did. I wish I could say I did something better by him, but all I really did was disappear. I didn't talk to my friend for over a year, long enough for her to have dumped her boyfriend and for the uncle to go away with him. I don't know what's happened to either of them, or if I would even recognize them now that I'm twice the age I was then. I do wish them well. I just hope not to meet, considering our history. I'd rather meet the uncle, who was always a gentleman, than that blonde, bearded guy I saw that day. Number 3. This happened in 2007 when myself and a friend, two 17-year-old females from Ireland, spent 2 weeks in a small town in Italy to take part in a language course. We were studying Italian at school and needed to improve our spoken Italian before the exams. In this small town, there was nothing much to do for two teenage girls, so we looked forward to going to the local bar each night and having a few drinks. The bar we are in, like a lot of places in Europe, free pours the alcohol, so although we have only had around 3 vodka and cokes, in reality it is probably the equivalent of splitting a large bottle of vodka. Basically, we are plastered. We end up, unfortunately, talking to these 2 Italian guys who seem to be about 23, 24 years old. One of the guys is really quiet, so his friend does all the talking. After about 15 minutes, it becomes very apparent that the talkative guy is interested in my friend, who at this stage is very worse for wear and practically falling asleep at the table. He becomes increasingly predatorial, squishing himself as close as possible to her, and was quite forcefully caressing her arms and legs. At this point, I decide that enough is enough and that we have to go home. Of course, they follow us, so I am trying to hold up my friend and steer her home, while this guy is becoming more and more aggressive. After about 10 minutes of walking and me continually telling them to leave us alone, things take a bit of a turn for the worse. He aggressively starts to try and pull my friend away from me, and when I hold on, it is like a game of tug-of-war. He starts to get violent, slapping my hands and arms, and at one point narrowly misses my face. At this point, I'm yelling at my friend to sober up and be of some use. Like I said, it was a small Italian town, and this was a midweek evening, so no one was about in the streets. We are pretty much on our own. After a few more minutes of struggling, it seems like they finally take the hint and bugger off. We walk a bit more down the street, and my friend is managing to sober up. From where we are, we have to take the next left, and then our apartment is on the next street on the right. We're about to turn left when I see a newspaper stand further up the street. The stand is closed, obviously, and faces the street where our flat is located. It is very dark, but I can just make out a sort of circular shape above the newspaper stand. As I'm looking, the circular shape ducks down, and I realize that it was someone's head. The guys are hiding behind the newspaper stand with God knows what intentions. Sheer panic sets in as I'm trying to assess the situation, wondering if these guys are really going to hurt us and how we would be able to avoid them seeing us go into our apartment from their hiding place. I decide that instead of turning left immediately, we'll keep walking until the next left and then take the next left turning on that street. If you imagine, it is a U-shape, so we have 2 options for getting home from where we are, with our flat being located right in the middle of the street. We walk a bit further and take the next left. On this street, we cannot see the guys or the newspaper stand. Trying not to cry, I turn to my friend and say, "We are in a very dangerous situation. When we get to our street on the left, they will see us. I don't know what they are going to do, but you have to run to the door. Run as fast as you can. Don't waste your energy thinking about them. Use all of your energy for running." At this point, she starts to cry, having not realized the severity of the situation until now. She hands me the house key from her bag, which I hold tightly in my hand, prepared to open the door quickly. As we reach the corner of our street, we see two shadows at the other end. Both duos simply stand and watch each other from a distance for a brief moment, and then I whisper out of the side of my mouth, "Run!" We start sprinting towards our apartment, bearing in mind it's quite a long street. When the guys see us running, they start legging it down the street. My friend starts screaming, and I'm yelling at her to move faster. After what seems like forever, we reach the door of the apartment, and I'm frantically trying to push the key into the lock. She is screaming, "Hurry up! They're coming! They're going to get us!" I finally manage to open the door, and we practically fall through, slamming it shut. Literally 2 seconds after we shut the door, the guys arrive and start frantically trying the handle, banging on the transparent door with their fists. Me and my friend are just sitting on the stairs, crying, trying to catch our breath. We watch them as they try to bust open the door with their shoulders, screaming curses in Italian. They eventually stop, and we walk up the stairs to our flat. About 15 minutes later, I walk quietly down the stairs to check that they were gone. They are both still there, two creepy Italian potential rapists, standing with their hands and faces pressed against the glass, staring. Creepy Mina here of the Worst Nightmare Channel. From a peeping Tom in a pool changing area, to a stalking hiker, to an encounter with two not-so-gentlemanly gentlemen, I hope you enjoyed these 3 stories of women encountering creepers. If you'd like to hear your true crime or paranormal story read here on this channel, send your story to creepymina@gmail.com or post your story to the new subreddit, WillingStories, where other horror channel creators can use it. Please comment, give me a thumbs up, share, subscribe if you haven't already, and don't forget to stay safe.